healing in Jesus' name, chapter 2. And some people have asked me why I cover up my camera. And I just wanted to explain that real quick. First of all, I don't want you to see anything. I want you to concentrate on the words that are being read to you. And don't want you to be distracted by anything. And second of all, no one wants to see some old lady reading a book. So, just to be honest. And other people have asked me, by the way, what DND means. It stands for Dandelions Never Die. And it's something that Shelley will mention in a little bit in the book. And I just shorten it to DND. And let's get started on chapter 2. We are at the Keno Estate in Crystal Cove, California. The moment she'd uttered the words, "Help me," he'd come immediately awake. He'd been dreaming again. The same dream, same feeling of urgency. He glanced at the clock. It was 3:14 a.m. Rising, he made his way to the bathroom, flipped on the light, and reveled in the sensation of cool water as he splashed it on his heated face. He glanced in the mirror and gasped. Staring back, floating before him for a brief instant, were the eyes. Raising a dark eyebrow, he shook his head and gave a soft chuckle. He could see the headlines now. Martial arts master Eric Keno dies of fright in his own bathroom. He'd been having dreams and visions of the eyes, as his son called them, for some time now. He had no idea to whom the eyes belonged. They were definitely feminine, beautiful, but always sad and sometimes filled with fear. He'd been given precognitive dreams before, but they'd always involved someone he knew. These dreams were different, and they were accompanied by an enormously intense feeling of desperation. He'd struggled to interpret the meaning of the dreams. He'd prayed fervently, asking God to make known his wishes. Who is this woman? Is she going to be appearing in his life? What does she have to do with him? Tonight, he'd heard her voice clear as a bell. "Help me," she'd said, as if she'd been lying right next to him and whispered in his ear. He'd felt her breath against his cheek. He felt the press of her body, and she'd learned as she'd leaned close. He'd come immediately awake with the knowing that he had to find her, and that he would find her. But he had to actively search for her and not just hope that one day he'd run into her. He nodded. "I hear your voice, Father," he whispered, as he returned to his bed. Taking long, slow breaths, he slowly sank into a deep sleep. New scene. The next morning, having felt compelled, a godly prompting, Eric tossed items into a suitcase as he packed for a regional martial arts tournament in Atlanta. He was glad to be on the move after the decision he'd made the night before, because he intended to look for the eyes. When he and his son had first received the invitation to the Atlanta tournament, they'd had to decline. But then suddenly Ricky's schedule opened up, and Eric took that as a sign that he should attend. He would be there only as an observer. The guy organizing the tournament called him an honored dignitary. Eric shuddered at the title. His son, movie icon Ricky Keno, was scheduled to perform one of his much-demanded demonstrations. Eric wasn't immune to the pride a father feels when his son achieved success, and he enjoyed seeing Ricky do his thing. After all, Eric was the one who'd schooled Ricky in the martial arts since he'd been old enough to walk. Eric hadn't realized at the time that passing his knowledge on to his son would make Ricky a celebrity. Ricky had the, quote, package, as the people in the industry put it. The looks, the body, the talent, the personality. He'd begun as a child star and worked his way up to a leading man. At only 21 years of age, Ricky was one of the hottest stars in Hollywood. Even though thoughts of Ricky's success always lifted Eric's spirits, his mind was still heavy with images of the woman in his dream. It concerned him because other such dreams had turned out to be a prediction of unpleasant things. He dreamt of his wife in great peril and pain a year before she was diagnosed with cancer. He'd seen a branch of a tree, a great tree, snap over and over the week before Ricky fell out of one and broke his arm. There had been numerous dreams touching numerous subjects. Every once in a while, he'd actually been in tune enough to be able to avoid disaster, like the speeding truck that ran the red light. He'd known not to go when the light turned green, avoiding his own death and the death of his son. And he'd known the time bad guys waited in an alleyway with thoughts of murder and mayhem. He'd revised their actions, if not their thinking. Those events, however, involved himself and people close to him. Now, for some reason, he felt he was supposed to help a woman he didn't even know. Still, he trusted that nothing is random. God's universe is ordered, not chaotic. Things happen for a reason. And so he was anxious to find her. Cheer up. The cloud hanging over Eric dissipated at the sound of his son's voice. Eric glanced over. Ricky stood in the doorway with his usual wide smile. He was a breath of sunshine wherever he went, and Eric could think of no one in the world that he loved and treasured more. What's up, Dad? You look like you're going to a funeral. Do I? Yeah, and you're not. You're coming to watch me, and really, what could be more pleasant than that? Eric smiled. Truly, he said, not hiding the sarcasm. Ricky grinned. So, really, why are you so down? I'm not down, Eric shrugged. I guess I'm feeling a little intense. Ricky circled around to massage his father's shoulders. Whatever you want to call it, Dad, you got to learn to lighten up. You know what they say, stress kills. Really? And what do they say about the surviving children? Do they say anything about the guilt that must consume them? Oh, funny, Dad. So it seems you have a sense of humor after all, be it ever so small. Eric closed the suitcase. Large enough to accommodate you every day. He placed an arm around Ricky's shoulders. Let's go. You know, you don't have to come if you're not up to it. Are you kidding me? I'm looking forward to it. Besides, I'll be able to keep an eye out for my MART student. Ricky smiled. Oh, I have no doubt you'll find the right one. He thought about his father's legendary status as a MART instructor. The MART, an acronym for Martial Arts Recruiting Tournament, had become a huge event. An instructor takes a rookie student and turns them into a black belt champion in 1 year's time. The MART, the Olympics of the martial arts world, had become big business, thanks in part to his dad. What Bella Caroli is to the world of gymnastics and Vince Lombardi is to football, Eric Kino is to the world of martial arts. Well, I will find the right one, Eric agreed, and after last night's dream, I've decided that I also need to find the owner of the eyes. Ricky nodded thoughtfully. So maybe the eyes belong to the student, he suggested. Eric nodded. Maybe. Throughout the long and tedious flight to Atlanta, Ricky kept up a steady stream of chatter. Hours later, in the elevator of the Atlanta Hilton, Ricky eyed his father. Well, you've been awfully quiet. Eric touched his son on the shoulder and he sighed. I guess I haven't been very good company. I'm okay. I'm just a little preoccupied. As long as you're okay. You're starting to sound like your grandmother, Eric teased, trying to lighten the mood. And Ricky's smile flashed. Well, Grandma did tell me to take good care of you. Oh, that's funny. She told me to take care of you. Well, I was about to go straight in and order up some room service for the both of us. Would you consider that trying to take care of you or just being polite? Oh, I'd never think you were just being polite, Eric quipped, knocking Ricky in the back of the head as he swiped the key card. Ricky headed straight to lower the thermostat next to the phone to order food. Atlanta in June was unbelievably hot and humid. Having been raised in Los Angeles, Ricky was accustomed to the heat, but not the humidity. He placed his order quickly and then plopped down across the bed, bemoaning the heat. Eric smiled at his son's discomfort and decided he would make up for being a lousy traveling companion by resorting to some of their old antics. Oh, this heavy air, lots of oxygen. This would be a great alternative to your training and give some diversity to your workout. Yeah, until I have to fight on a mountaintop. Ricky rolled over, grabbed a pillow. Work out if you want, Dad. I'm already in great shape, and even if I wasn't, I'm not leaving the air conditioning. He grabbed the remote. Let's see what the Braves are doing. Nonchalantly, Eric made his way to the bathroom, ice bucket beneath his arm. I don't know, Rick, Eric called from the bathroom. You're looking a little soft to me. No way, Dad. You're just jealous. Of your youth? Maybe, Eric said quietly, having crept up beside Ricky. Or maybe because I'm standing here all hot and sweaty and you're nice and cool. What are you talking about? The bucket of water hit him square in the face. Eric's laughter almost botched his quick retreat to the bathroom. He locked the door, but could hear Ricky sputter and threaten to do all kinds of ill will to his own father. Ricky's tirade soon ceased, and the room became eerily quiet. Smiling, Eric folded his arms and waited. It took Ricky only a few seconds to pick the lock. Slowly, the door eased open, and Ricky stood calmly in the entry, grinning wickedly, dangling his nail clippers that he'd used before his father's eyes. "I'm going to kick your butt, honorable father." Eric sprang forward with blinding speed, disarming his son and tossing him handily and unceremoniously into the shower. Before Ricky could get his footing, Eric flipped on the cold water, and Ricky gasped for breath, reached out and grabbed at his dad, but Eric easily deflected his son's arm, leaving Ricky to clutch nothing but air and cold water. Honorable father kicks honorable son's butt. Amazingly, effortlessly, he bowed to his worthy opponent. "Like I said, son, you're getting soft." Ricky returned the bow. "Well, you are the master. And don't you forget it," Eric called back as he left the bathroom to wait for room service. New scene. Shelley Adams stared into the mirror and wondered at the woman who stared back. She was a mother of 3 and had at one time believed that there would always be a loving husband standing beside her, but there was not. He'd forced her hand. He'd shown her that he cared nothing for her. Remarkable as it seemed, she'd found some strength from somewhere and removed him from her life. Her husband's nonchalant attitude toward her assault had been an eye-opener and the final nail in the coffin for their marriage. She'd gotten pregnant and married at age 16. She'd never been without him, and now that she'd gone through with the divorce, she admitted she wasn't used to the quiet house. At times, the loneliness threatened to engulf her. This was one of those times. The house was dark. The silence was deafening. The boys were with their father for the summer, and daughter Bree was in New York taking a deep breath. Taking a deep breath, Shelley reminded herself that she didn't need her ex-husband. She didn't need anyone, or so she liked to think. However, she hadn't been prepared for the fears that had begun to take over her life. It surprised her because it seemed she'd been fearless in getting out of an emotionally abusive marriage. She never used to scare easily, yet over the past few years she'd begun to jump at her own shadow. She was afraid of the dark. She never walked anywhere alone. She was overprotective of the kids. Allowing Bree to go to New York had meant a major fight between herself, her ex-husband, and her daughter. Maybe the fear was because of what had happened to her, or maybe it was because she'd never really been alone until now. Over the past 2 years, she'd learned to stand on her own, and slowly, she was learning to be strong. Still, the fear was always there, hovering over her or beside her. But she was working on it, and part of working on it would keep her occupied all day tomorrow. Because in the morning, she'd be participating in her very first martial arts tournament. The huge regional event included all styles, from karate to taekwondo to jiu-jitsu and all belts. It was very exciting, but she had to admit she was more nervous than excited. Maybe spawned by that random act of violence that had taken place almost 2 years earlier, or maybe by some new post-traumatic fear, she'd set a goal to master one of the martial arts. When she thought deeply about it, she had to admit, it was like a voice deep inside her was urging her toward that goal, and it had grown into a burning desire. The police never caught the man who'd assaulted her. Sometimes she wasn't sure they even believed he existed. The counselor at the Rape Crisis Center had helped her with the frustration, but not with the self-disgust. It sickened her that she hadn't fought. She'd let fear paralyze her. She'd sworn she'd never let that happen again. She'd also sworn she would stand up to her husband, a considerable feat, considering her emotional dependency on him. She'd met him when she was 15. She'd clung to him because, unlike her parents and brothers, he made her feel important. But it was all a guise. She'd now learned that a man in college goes after a young girl usually because he needs to control her completely. The divorce had been a huge step. Now she had to become strong. Her counselor had supported Shelley's conviction that taking action would help to alleviate the feelings of shame and frustration. She told her, do something positive, something you've always wanted to do. Do something for you. It will help you to feel empowered. That's what had led to a taekwondo class at the local Y. It fit her budget, it gave her something to focus on, and had given her back some confidence. She worked hard, desperate to even the odds, to be on a little more equal footing with the male species and not quite so vulnerable. But now Shelley studied her reflection. Sometimes she felt so old, yet she was only 34. 30 is a new 20, a co-worker had remarked. She admitted she was flattered when people thought that she and Bree, her 17-year-old daughter, were sisters. I have great eyes, Shelley thought. Even her ex had told her that. They were large and brown and were framed with unique lashes that appeared to have been sprinkled with gold dust. Coming out of an emotionally abusive marriage, she was learning to be kind to herself, and this was the first thing she'd allowed. Pretty eyes. Her hair was long and thick, with large, voluptuous, natural curls. Bree let her know that her girlfriends would kill to have those curls, and told her she'd personally kill her mom if she were to ever cut off her hair. That was no problem for Shelley, since having it long made it easier to put it back in the no-fuss long braid or ponytail that she usually wore. Making her way to the front door, she tested the lock and then headed into the kitchen to check the back door. She was a wimp, especially when the children were gone. Sometimes, in the dark, she could feel the panic take over. It was those times that she questioned her decision to become single. It would be nice to have someone there to help her feel safe. She'd had a few offers, but she'd turned them down, mostly because she'd never met anyone who intrigued her enough to draw her interest, but also because she had to learn to stand on her own. For a long time, she'd been both emotionally and physically crippled, but now she was getting stronger. Tomorrow's tournament was a big deal because it was her first time competing. The goal to obtain black belt meant that she must compete. And there were several different areas for competition in a tournament, including forms, sparring, and weapons. She must spar and spar well in order to accomplish black belt, but that would be down the road. The further the better, she thought. For her very first competition, she'd elected to compete in forms only. Taking a breath, she repeated her new mantra: strive for perfection, strive for perfection, strive for perfection. New scene. As the early morning sun made its way across the plush hotel room, Eric emerged from the bathroom to find Ricky sitting on a bed, peeling a banana plucked from a complimentary bowl of fruit. It's about time, Ricky laughed. Come on, Dad. If you don't hurry, we won't have time for breakfast, and I am starved. Well, where have you been? I woke. You were gone. I assumed you were eating. Ricky gave a sheepish grin. Nah, I was just checking out the scenery. There's not much to check out, though. I guess Southern girls sleep late on Saturdays. However, I did accidentally attract the attention of a couple of kids in the lobby, so I signed a few autographs. I let them snap a few pics, just enough to get the blood going. Eric frowned. I didn't realize that your star status ego had grown so big that you now need a fix in the mornings to get you started on your day. I think I'm going to have to bring you down a peg or two. Gosh, can't even take a joke, Ricky grumbled as they left the room. The tournament was being held in a large high school super gym in a suburban area just south of Atlanta. The huge event included competitors from most of the Southeast, and there would be several thousand spectators in attendance. The limo arrived, and as celebrities, Eric and Ricky were escorted to the head judge's table, where they were introduced to the local martial arts dignitaries and given a place of honor at the same table. And while Eric took a seat, a crowd quickly formed around Ricky, as usual. Eric watched as Ricky, ensconced in his element, signed autographs and chatted with youngsters, taking time to boost their confidence with a well-placed word. Local press took pictures and tried for impromptu interviews. Thankfully, there were no paparazzi. They tended to avoid the kinos. Watching Ricky now, Eric considered his son's bright, exuberant personality and compared it with his own more serious demeanor, marveling how they could be so close and yet so different. Physically, they were similar. They both had straight-ish black hair. Ricky's just skimmed his shoulders. Eric's was slightly longer. They had bronze skin from the Hawaiian part of their ancestry and dark eyes. One film critic said it was remarkable how Ricky's eyes could go from warm and compassionate to hard as steel. His eyes, though, were only part of what made Ricky a star. He had a musculature that was rock hard and a bright, alert mind. He was swift and agile and very good at what he did. Ricky had earned a real black belt at 9 years of age. 2 years later, his mother had died of cancer. Ricky and Eric immersed themselves in their art as therapy for their loss. Losing his wife had nearly defeated Eric, but his faith and caring for Ricky brought the light back. Another glimpse in Ricky's direction made Eric smile. His son now had his arms around 2 giggling blondes. They posed while a third girl took a picture, then turned around and took a selfie of the 4 of them. "Thank you so much," the girls purred in their sweet southern accents. "Oh, the pleasure's all mine, I assure you," Ricky crooned back, glancing over at his father with a grin. Eric rolled his eyes and pointed to his wristwatch, reminding Ricky that he had some arrangements to make for his demonstration. Ricky bid the ladies farewell, grabbed his bag, and headed to meet with the lucky ones who'd been chosen to help with the show. An hour later, at 8 on the dot, the nervous tournament director approached and bowed to Eric. Master Kino, sir, do you happen to know where Ricky is? It's time to begin, and of course, we wanted to introduce our celebrities." Standing, Eric offered to go and locate Ricky himself. He passed up the locker rooms and headed toward the lobby where concessions were already being served because Ricky was an insatiable eating machine, and Eric had a feeling he'd find him there, stuffing his face with all manner of unhealthy delicacies. New scene. Cursing herself as she drove, Shelley pushed her old faded red Ford to its limit. "I know I turned the alarm on. I know I did. I checked it at least twice, of all times for it not to go off." "Stay green, stay green, stay green," she chanted as she approached the next intersection. Beads of perspiration trickled down her forehead as she streaked into the high school parking lot at 8:03 a.m. Grateful that at least the tournament was being held at her daughter's alma mater, only a few minutes away from her house, she hoped desperately they'd let her sign in late. Grabbing her bag, she sprinted to the gym and jerked open the heavy door. Cool air rushed out to greet her, calming her. Sucking in a deep breath, she looked around nervously to find a young man in a white uniform gathering papers from a long table. "Oh, am I too late to sign in?" she asked in a panic. "No, ma'am, you lucked out. We're running a little behind," he answered, thumbing through the papers in his arms. "Here you go," he said, pulling out a paper. "Find your events and sign in." Once she did, he looked over her form, checked off her registration number, and nodded. "You are assigned to Arena 2. He looked up and smiled. "So, locker rooms are through those doors over there and to the right. You better hurry." Shelley shot toward the doors in a run, then turned back to offer a belated thank you. "Oomph!" Just as she turned forward again, her face smashed against something solid, and she went down hard. The contents of the bag she'd never bothered to close tumbled across the floor, and she put a hand to her forehead and gave a soft moan. Realizing that she'd run into a person, even though she'd first thought she'd misjudged the distance to the door, she rubbed her nose and began apologizing profusely. "I am so sorry. I was running late. I should have been watching where I was going. I hope I didn't hurt." She'd been crawling around gathering her things, but stopped when a bronzed hand held out her folded purple belt for her to place back in her bag. Her eyes followed the hand up to its source, and she found herself looking into the most incredible face. He smiled. "Let me help you," the man said politely. He lifted her to her feet as if she were nothing more than a rag doll, which both amazed and annoyed her. Amazed at his strength, annoyed because it reminded her of her vulnerability as a woman. The latter thought stirred anger in her heart. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was calm and soft and stole her anger immediately. She gazed at his face again. Dark eyes and long dark hair tied back at the nape of his neck, strong posture that gave a certain nobleness to his appearance, like that of a Native American warrior. And that smile. He had the kindest smile she'd ever seen. It made her feel safe, even happy. It took her breath away. He raised his eyebrows at her, and she realized that he waited for an answer to his question. Oh, yes, I'm fine. I'm so sorry. I was late, and..." For the second time, she was unable to finish her sentence, but this time it was because he raised his hand to quiet her. Oh, I'm the one at fault. I should have been looking where I was going, and certainly should have been quick enough to get out of your way. Are you sure you're not hurt? You were moving pretty fast, he said with humor in his eyes. She laughed and rubbed her forehead. Oh, I'm fine, other than the fact that your chest is hard as a rock. She felt the blush creep up her neck. I did not just say that. Are you competing? He asked, not acknowledging her statement as he handed her the rest of her belongings. No, I mean, yes. Well, I mean, only in forms. He smiled again. Forms are important. Yeah, I guess you're right. Are you competing? She asked. No, I'm not. He seemed amused by the question. I came to watch my son. However, now I have 2 people to watch. 2 people? My son and you. He smiled again, and she thought she'd rise off the floor. He quickly brought her back to earth. I think they're about to start. Oh, goodness, I have to go. Eric turned and watched as she disappeared inside the women's locker room. New scene. Shelley dressed quickly, hands trembling as the fear of her first competition seeped into her mind. She smoothed golden-brown strands of hair back into the thick braid that fell just a few inches short of her waist and hurried down the stairs to join the others already sitting on the floor along the edge of their designated mats. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, she took long, slow, deep breaths to help center herself. She tried to clear her mind, seeking the strength she needed to perform this seemingly simple task. Looking her opponents over, she took measure of the 8 other women competing in her division. None of them were from her class at the Y. Except for herself, only the younger students from the YMCA had opted to participate in the tournament. Her instructor had pretty much let her know that she was on her own because he had to be there for the kids. She assured him she'd be fine. She'd acted so nonchalant, but truth be told, she really wanted to do well. She'd practiced for hours with her 2 sons. Still, she reminded herself, the winning wasn't important. It was progressing that was important, and participating in competition signified progress in her quest to become strong. Feeling calmer, Shelley exhaled, letting her mind relax. The minute she did, the traitor's organ wandered right back to the man that she'd run into. Why was she thinking about him? Because she hated men. Well, most men anyway. Okay, she didn't hate them, but she sure didn't trust them, especially strange men. Still, as men go, that particular one had been attractive. Even so, was she really so shallow that a hunky male could distract her from the important task she was about to undertake? She shook her head. What a fool she must have seemed, crawling around on the floor, collecting deodorant and hairbrush. Thank goodness she didn't have anything more personal in her bag. Well, she thought as she rubbed her head, remembering the hardness of his body, he was an impressive specimen. The thing that really stood out, though, was his kindness and something else. A glow, a calmness. There was a quiet calm that seemed to surround him. Realizing her mind had wandered again, she quickly regained her concentration while she waited for the tournament to begin. Shelley closed her eyes, she drew a deep breath, and repeated her mantra. But only a minute later, the event director began speaking into the microphone. He gave a small, welcoming speech and went over the rules of the meet. And now I have a special surprise for you, the director continued. I know we said that we were unable to get a celebrity to attend today's event, but it seems he was able to fit us in after all, and he brought along a bonus. So we are extremely excited to have with us today 2 stars of the martial arts world. Shelley excitedly squirmed around to get a better view. I have the extreme honor of introducing to you a legend in our industry, a master who taught other masters, 3-time Mart Instructor Champion and Black Belt Hall of Famer, Master Eric Kino. Shelley's jaw dropped. It was him, the guy she'd slammed into. She watched Master Kino stand from his seat at the head judge's table. He bowed to the crowd, and then he seemed to glance in her direction with a slight smile. She looked behind her to see who he could possibly be smiling at. Me? Is he smiling at me? She wondered. She was sure that steam rose from her red face. And we're very pleased and excited to introduce to you Master Kino's son, star of Shadow Warrior, The Lone Wolf, Warzone, and To Master the Art, just to name a few. The applause all but drowned out the announcer. I'm sure you all know Ricky Kino. The gym, filled to its 4,000 capacity, made the wild applause and whistles deafening. Ricky stood and bowed to the audience very seriously, and then broke into the famous broad smile, waving to all. Shelley joined the crowd, applauding long and hard. Ricky Kino, the boys are gonna die. Oh, how I wish they could be here. She'd taken her sons to see Shadow Warrior just before they'd left to spend the summer with their dad. She couldn't wait to tell them. After our forms competition, Ricky will be honoring us with a demonstration. The crowd erupted again. It took the director several minutes to regain control and get the tournament underway. And while the women in her arena were called on to perform, sudden stage fright overtook Shelley. Maybe I won't compete after all. I don't really need to. I have nothing to prove to anyone. She wanted desperately to rationalize her way out of it, but she couldn't. She really did have something to prove, if not to anyone else, at least to herself. She hadn't fought 2 years ago. She laid there and allowed him to have his way. As usual, her stomach churned at the memory. She would not just sit idly by today. Pushing the unpleasant memory aside, she tried to focus her mind on something else, anything else, and found herself thinking of Master Kino again. Had she really asked him if he was competing? She shook her head and groaned inwardly. He must have thought her a complete idiot. She should have recognized him, or at least realized he was not just a regular competitor. Shelley Adams. Her head jerked around, the blood draining from her face as she realized her mind had been wandering all over the place when she should have been paying attention. They called her name again, and she pushed herself into action. She rose and bowed, out of respect to her domain, which in this case was the mat, her home, for the next few minutes. She walked bravely onto it, purposely avoiding any eye contact with the head judge's table. In a voice as loud as she could muster, she called out the name of her form, her instructor, and school. She then addressed the 3 judges sitting to one side of the arena. With your permission, I will begin. The judges nodded. She backed up 3 steps to the exact center of the mat, bowed, and took her stance. Forms, hyungs, pumse, or katas, require intensity and concentration in order to be properly executed. The forceful yet fluid movements are to be thrown, as though each blow lands on an imaginary opponent, or each block counters an imaginary punch or kick. Inner vision and discipline are necessary. The judge can count off for the slightest of variations, such as an arm too high, fingers not together, foot turned out too far. Shelley had worked hard perfecting her form. Every muscle of her body, from her fingertips down to her toes, was tense. Yet she moved smoothly and gracefully as she stepped and kicked first one invisible opponent to her left, and then the other on her right. She became completely immersed, imagining the attackers coming at her from each side. Watch her and tell me what you think, Eric said to Ricky as he pointed to the woman with the long hair in Arena 2. Ricky waited for her to finish. Huh? She's a looker. But I guess that's not what you mean, huh? When his father didn't answer, Ricky got serious. Okay. She has potential, he allowed. Is that someone you know? Someone I'd like to know, Eric answered softly without taking his eyes off of her. Ricky considered. I see. Eric turned his head. You see what? Oh, nothing, Ricky answered with a sly smile. Ignoring his son, Eric folded his hands together and rested his chin on them. He watched as she finished and returned to sit beside her mat, thinking about how she'd looked up at him in the lobby. He'd nearly grabbed her by the shoulders, proclaiming her the one. He'd looked into beautiful, big brown eyes, and he felt hypnotized because he'd seen those eyes before, in his dreams. She'd blushed under his gaze, which made her appear quite innocent. He'd had to fight an overwhelming urge to wrap his arms around her and comfort her. The need to protect was strong. And now that he'd found her, it seemed obvious that his task is to train her. Ricky was right. The woman in his dream and the student he is to teach for the mart are one and the same. And he probably has been led to her to train her because there is some unfortunate event lurking in her future. So positive now of the direction he should take, he wondered how he should approach her about becoming his student. If he explained to her how he's seen her before in his dreams, she'd probably think he was a lunatic. He knew he couldn't let the opportunity to meet her go by without taking action, though. Nothing to do but go with instinct. He was pulled from his thoughts when the forms competitions in each category neared their end, and Eric turned to his son. "Are you ready?" "Always," Ricky grinned. Ricky stood and stretched his thick, muscular arms above his head and then walked back to a clear space behind the table to limber up. Eric pulled a box of boards out from under the table. Ricky would blast them to bits in his demo. A group of kids leaned over the railing, looking down at Ricky as he warmed up, and Ricky glanced up, grinning, and waved, and they shrieked with laughter. Leaving his son to his antics, Eric looked back to Arena 2, but they had been dismissed. Rising, he walked slowly through the crowd and up the steps, but didn't find the woman that he sought. He went into the lobby and grabbed a bottle of water and spoke to a few teenage boys who asked his thoughts on a particular defense movement. He set them straight. "Well, the best defense is offense. Don't mess around. You end it, and you end it quickly. Then there's no room for error." He shook their hands, he autographed their programs, and he started back, but he pulled up short. There she was, at the top of the stairs, gazing out over the crowd. She'd changed clothes out of her uniform and was dressed now in the clothes that he'd seen her in earlier, jeans and an airy white blouse. Her light brown hair with streaks of gold, still crinkly from the braid she'd worn earlier, cascaded over her shoulders. It wasn't cut into one of the day's trendy styles. Instead, it flowed down her back in long golden curls. It added to her inherent femininity and made a statement that she wasn't your average woman. He found himself longing to reach out and touch the thick curls and lift them. Eric watched her for just a moment as she went up on her toes and leaned over the railing, looking down on the activities below. Her hair stopped just short of a trim waist. Her jeans hugged her bottom. Wow, what was he thinking? He sighed. He was thinking like a man and not like a martial arts instructor, and not like the man of God he tried to be, because he envisioned touching more than her curls. Getting himself under control, he strode up to her and lightly touched the small of her back to gain her attention, and she stiffened and spun to face him. "Hello, Shelley," he said softly. "I'm sorry if I startled you." "Oh," she said, drawing a breath to calm herself. "It's you. You know my name?" "I heard the judges call you. By the way, you did well." He watched for a reaction in her eyes, but she looked down too quickly. "Oh, thank you, Master Kino." "Please call me Eric," he insisted. She looked back up at him and nodded in agreement. "Have you seen the scores?" she asked anxiously. He shook his head. "No." She shrugged. "Well, it doesn't really matter. I'm just glad I got through it. This was my first competition, and I was really nervous." "Well, if you were nervous, I certainly couldn't tell." Eric gazed into her eyes. He could glimpse something in her, a quiet strength. He smiled at her. Simple words had been spoken, nothing of importance, and yet the feeling that something of magnitude was taking place was hanging there, waiting for him to grab it. He lifted his head heavenward for a moment to ask for guidance. Eric watched her as she glanced away, looking out over the huge gym, as down below competitors and their families ran helter-skelter, trying to find the place that would offer the best view of Ricky Kino's demonstration. He told himself it was merely a teacher observing a potential student, yet there was a certain pull that he couldn't ignore. She was extremely attractive. She wasn't all done up. Instead, she had a natural beauty. There was an innocence about her, a sweetness. And well, yeah, she was sexy, he admitted, though he would have to quell those kinds of thoughts. He was here to help her. In his dream, she'd been in peril. He needed to keep his mind clear if he is to help her, and the need to help her was strong. "Are you staying for the rest of the tournament?" he finally asked. She turned back. "Oh, yes, I wouldn't miss any of this for the world," she gushed. "It's also wonderful, and everyone's skill is absolutely amazing. It's so amazing, and I just love it." Her face was a delightful pink, her eyes sparkling, her enthusiasm refreshing, and she rolled her eyes, and he knew she silently reprimanded herself for getting carried away. He paused and took a deep breath. So, please don't think it too forward of me since we've only just met, but when this is over, I'd love to have you join me for dinner. He watched her face go from pink to fire engine red. Shelley went over his words in her mind, making sure she really did hear what she thought she'd heard. Master Kino just asked me out. This can't really be happening. Why me? Why would this man ask me to dinner? Oh, maybe it's like you always read about celebrities. They have girls in every town, one-night conquest. I don't even know if he's married. Why me? Does he see me as a groupie that would be just too easy to pass up? Oh, no, it can't be like that. He is, after all, a master and someone in the public eye. He'd want to show irreproachable behavior, wouldn't he? If he just wanted to find a girl to have for a night, he could have his choice of any of the women here. Most who are younger and beautiful and, oh, what am I doing? Okay, get a grip. I'd be perfectly safe with him. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime invitation, so what could it hurt? Besides, the boys would never let me hear the end of it if I were to turn down Ricky Kino's father. Well, she started slowly, trying to think of a clever way to accept his invitation, but nothing came to mind. Yes, I'd love to, she finally blurted out. Wonderful, he beamed, hitting his fist gently against the railing. May I meet you in the lobby as soon as the tournament is over? I'll be there, she said, nodding her head. See you then, he said, as he walked away, pulling out his phone immediately, because he needed to rent a car. Shelley watched him walk, his well-muscled arms swinging down from broad shoulders. Her eyes followed, taking note of his powerful body. He wore a black shirt and black kakama pants, the kind that were snug at the waist and ballooned out at the sides. His dark, almost black hair was back in a band, swaying gently as he walked. His voice had been soft, yet commanding. He'd spoken her name in a way that she could feel in the pit of her stomach, almost as if he'd touched her cheek. Taking a deep breath, she told herself she was not hallucinating. This really had happened. She'd come to a martial arts tournament. She'd met a famous martial arts master, and he'd asked her, yes, her, out to dinner. Not any of the gorgeous young girls in any given direction, but her. Why? And why, with her aversion to men, had she accepted? She should be terrified to accept an invitation from a man she just met. So why did she? Because, she thought, somehow he made her trust him. Shelley maintained her place at the railing as the room grew quiet with anticipation, and the announcer needed no other words than the few he spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, Ricky Kino. Accompanied by the roar of the crowd and dressed in a black and gold martial arts uniform, Ricky entered the floor at a run. He turned 5 back handsprings, ending with the full layout. He bowed and waited for the narration. In the martial arts, nothing is as important as your reaction time in defending yourself against an attacker. If you're ever caught with your pants down, Ricky joked around, pretending to check his waistband, and the subsequent laughter made speaking impossible for a few moments. If you've ever caught with your guard down, the narrator corrected, though it was obviously scripted. It's all over, and you may very well have made a fatal mistake. In actuality, it isn't reaction as much as anticipation. Some call this instinct. Truly, though, it's a skill that with enough practice can be acquired by anyone. All eyes were riveted on Ricky. Shelley was amazed at how quiet the room had become, when just moments before the crowd noise had been deafening. And for the next few minutes, you would be witness to a sort of martial arts paintball. Minus the paint, of course. Nothing has been pre-planned. When a lethal punch is thrown, you must stay down. Let's see how Ricky Kino fares against these guys. By the way, he's never met any of them before today. Shelley watched Ricky prepare to fight 5 black belt assailants. His body tensed for a moment, and then suddenly he straightened and shook his head, wagging his finger. One of the assailants didn't have on his headgear. Ricky motioned for him to put it on. Well, what about you? The young man asked. I'll take my chances, Ricky grinned. Shelley giggled along with the crowd at the banter. It was part of the script, but the crowd didn't care. Finally, the competitor swung into action. Ricky was amazing as he worked against the men. It became quickly evident that Ricky wasn't just a movie artist. His skills were real. With Master Kino for a father, Shelley figured that was as it should be. When the 5 attackers were down, the audience stood and cheered, none more enthusiastically than Shelley. And next, Ricky grabbed the nunchucks from Eric, which in this case was a pair of bright red and black hard wooden sticks joined by a chain. Ricky spun them around to get their feel. Suddenly, he stopped and dropped the weapon on the floor. And much to the delight of the young girls in the crowd, he untied his belt and pulled his uniform top over his head. Shelley had to admire him along with the rest of the crowd. His golden skin glistened with perspiration. His broad shoulders and rippling abs elicited oohs and ahs from the females. One even called out, "I love you, Ricky!" There was laughter as Ricky looked up and blew a kiss in her direction. There was an excited scream and more laughter. A murmur of admiration hummed through the crowd as he warmed up by working through a series of movements with the nunchucks. His speed was absolutely incredible. He then proceeded to demonstrate his skills using kicking pads as targets, held by 12 assistants. The weapon made a loud pop as it hit each pad. A back somersault, pop, as he hit another target. Then steadily to all sides of the circle, more pops. It began to sound as if someone had set off a string of firecrackers, and the audience roared. And in the last part of Ricky's demo, he broke boards using hands, feet, elbows, and fists. And when he finished, Ricky knelt on one knee as thundering applause rocked the arena. He finally rose, looking up, smiling, bowed, and ran off the floor. Immediately, the tournament was set back in motion, but Shelley kept her eyes on Ricky as he joined his father. Eric threw a towel at his son and patted him on the shoulder. Shelley studied them both, deciding they were quite a pair, and apparently very close. They looked like brothers, she thought. She felt intense admiration and was thrilled beyond words to have witnessed such perfection. Since Eric was the master, Shelley wondered if he ever gave demonstrations. Moving down the steps, she settled into a seat. This tournament had been a long time coming, and she wanted to soak in every bit of information that she could. Soon enough, it would be over, and she'd sit across the table from Master Kino and speak with him and listen to him and... Oh, no. What could I possibly have to say that would interest him? Okay. Get a hold of yourself. Talk about the tournament. That's it. The tournament. Now sit and watch. You need conversational ammunition. With as much patience as she could muster, she sat back and waited for things to begin. Things like the free sparring, like the weapons forms, and her life. Genesis 2:18. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." And that is the end of chapter 2.